Hello and welcome to Magic Boy Productions, where we build and play powerful commander decks and learn along the way. I'm Ben, aka Magic Boy on Magic Online, and today we'll be returning to Bracket 4 to showcase a high-powered enchantment Reanimator list led by Go-Shintai of Life's Origin. This video will feature a deck tech, gameplay with commentary where we see the list in action, a game review, and then some final thoughts on the deck. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we get into breaking down the list, I want to talk a little about why this deck even exists. As I build for the channel, I try to cycle through color identities to showcase different cards and strategies each week, and I wanted to feature a 5-color list. Identifying a commander that I found interesting was tough though. 5-color commanders tend to be pretty overpowered and uninteresting, present rails for deck building, or both. I wanted something powerful and proactive after the highly interactive Azorius Flash deck from last week, and I've always wanted to build Go-Shintai, so I started mulling on it. I honed in pretty quickly on its first ability. Reanimating enchantments is fairly unique, and it seemed like having all 5 colors to work with could yield some interesting results. Doubly so because there are plenty of enchantments that can help fill the graveyard. I didn't want to lean into shrines because that game plan is pretty well documented at this point, and the way it doubles up on enchantment synergy is kind of hat on a hat the way it plays out. I built a version of this for bracket 3 that had some constraints. I left Omniscience out because I feel like any deck that has the possibility of speedrunning that card doesn't fit with the intent of bracket 3. The payoffs that I chose were along the lines of Summon Knights of the Realm and Kiora Best the Sea God, massive enchantments that provided board presence. Even with those limitations, the games I played weren't great content. I basically steamrolled people, mostly because of the lack of interaction I encountered. I decided to go back to the drawing board and power the deck up to bracket 4 where it would encounter other powerful plans and efficient interaction to make things interesting, and that's how we got here. Like most decks in the format, this is a mid-range strategy. It aims to get an engine online to ramp and draw cards, and leans into synergy to get rolling and grind. We mix in some elements of ramp and Reanimator though, creating the potential to make powerful plays as early as the mid-game, and creating room in the deck for a powerful top end that can overwhelm other mid-range strategies. We lean into our themes to do so. Our Enchantress theme creates a core of synergistic mana and card advantage development, and our Graveyard theme gives us access to an entire extra zone of cards to draw from while enabling explosive reanimation options. These themes work together as well, with many of our Graveyard enablers being enchantments that can trigger our Enchantress effects. With all that in mind, the loose game plan of the deck involves a typical mid-range development phase where we do some ramping and play out our card draw enablers with the added goal of getting lots of or powerful enchantments into our graveyard. After the first few turns, we usually want to do some reanimating to vault us immediately into the kinds of plays that are usually reserved for the late game, but we may also need to do the mid-range thing of playing to or controlling the board depending how the game is proceeding. In the actual late game, we really want to be mass reanimating enchantments for explosive Enchantress advantages alongside the effects of the payoffs themselves, with a soft combo finish from haste enablers and enchantment animation. We also have expensive asymmetrical removal that can shut down opponents once we've gotten our mana in place. Looking at what Go-Shintai brings to the table, the first thing to consider is how we appear to other players. 5-color commanders always skew higher in terms of threat level since they can play the most powerful cards from every color, and Go-Shintai is actually a little worse off on that front since many people have seen the crazy value the Shrine plan can produce. Unless there's a more obvious threat among our opponents, we can expect to be on the receiving end of early aggression, and people will likely remove Go-Shintai whenever they can. We don't mind that though, because our commander isn't that important to our plan. We can make extremely powerful plays that have nothing to do with the legendary shrine, and have given it more of a supporting role. 4 mana for 4 power and 5 toughness spread across 2 bodies is a decent rate, especially when it also means 2 enchantments for our many cards that care about them. Often, that's all we'll really use Go-Shintai for, but its first ability provides a backup to our more powerful reanimation effects. In the late game, with a haste enabler and mana multiplier going, we can actually cast and activate Go-Shintai even through substantial commander attacks, which provides resilience for long grindy games. We've broken the deck down into several categories, and the amount of deck real estate we've allotted to each supports our overall archetype and subarchetypes. The mid-range shell accounts for about a fifth of the deck, and the graveyard plan represents nearly a quarter overall. We're a little under the usual complement of interaction for mid-range lists, which is a nod to the fact that we're looking to be on the proactive side of the spectrum. Our card advantage and value category features 5 Enchantress effects, which draw cards when we cast enchantments or when they enter. The latter are usually going to be better for us since they trigger off our reanimation as well, and Go-Shintai gets 2 draws off of them thanks to the Shrine token. We run 3 tutors, all of which are top of the library style. Sterling Grove also sets up some protection for our board, and Mystical and Vampiric Tutor are often going to be looking for mass reanimation effects if things are going to plan. Brainstorm is a nice safety valve for the expensive payoff cards that can clog up our hand early, and we have a lot of shuffle effects so it can dramatically increase our card quality. We also play 2 recursion pieces that work particularly well with our self-mill plan, with Walk-In Closet being a great way to get extra value out of our fetch lands. Our ramp plan leans heavily into our Enchantress theme too, being entirely made up of enchantments aside from 2 game changers. Mana Vault can enable double spells ahead of schedule or help cast a payoff enchantment several turns ahead of curve, while Crop Rotation can fetch up Serra's Sanctum to ramp while having great additional utility. We play 3 enchantments that get us extra land drops, which synergize powerfully with our Enchantress draw engine, allowing us to spew out the lands that end up in our hand. We also have a few efficient land enchanters that fix colors and put us ahead, and Overlord of the Hauntwoods as a ramp spell that can start to beat down later on. Sanctum Weaver is always kill on sight from enchantment decks, and it's particularly great in our list since we play some haste enablers. The third pillar of our early game involves getting cards, especially powerful enchantments, into our graveyard. We skew towards enchantments to do so, and many of them are inexpensive and provide additional utility. Attunement is a card you don't see often that can be incredibly powerful in a list like this. With mana multipliers, we can churn cards into our graveyard before going off. We use a mix of self-mill and discard options since we generally don't want expensive cards in our hand earlier in the game. The Master of Keys and Victor both get cards into our graveyard while producing additional value, and Entomb lets us put exactly what we need in the bin when we need it. These are the cards we want to get into our graveyard and cheat into play. Most of them let us ignore the constraints of mana, either multiplying our production or letting us cast spells for free. Decree of Silence, Fear of Sleep Paralysis, and Summon Bahamut are powerful control pieces. Demolisher Spawn can turn our dorky enchantresses and tokens into a real threat, and all but guarantees that a mass reanimation will be lethal for a few players. To get them back into play, we employ a mix of mass reanimation effects like Replenish, Eerie Ultimatum, and Redress Fate, which plays well with our top of library tutors, and reanimators that get us back cards once per turn. Yuna provides some extra oomph to any aggression we might employ as well, and Starfield of Nyx is actually best employed as a combo piece that can turn our cheated mana values into power and toughness. Starfield does make our enchantments vulnerable to creature removal though, so it's good to be thoughtful about using it. And of course, Go-Shintai can serve as an inefficient way to recur enchantments when all else fails. We run 3 enchantments that give our board haste, which has some low-level utility with our Commander and Sanctum Weaver, but can also let us win out of nowhere with a Replenish effect that includes either Starfield of Nyx or Demolisher Spawn. We really don't want to pass the turn to 3 opponents after committing a ton of resources to the board, so access to haste is important for either ending the game outright or targeting down the opponent most likely to rain on our parade. Bitter Reunion is a decent graveyard enabler as well, and Frostcliff Siege can be deployed in card draw mode on some boards. Concordant Crossroads is pure combo though, risky and efficient. We lean into enchantments in order to interact with our opponents as well. We're particularly good at shutting down opposing commanders with our complement of auras, and Awaken the Honored Dead basically does everything we might want. Lay Claim can cycle itself for reanimation to co-opt an opposing threat, and we have some counterspells to give us some game against more dedicated combo decks or protect our plan. Clever Concealment interacts with opposing removal, letting us save our whole board from sweepers. We aim for quality over quantity with our sweepers, all of which are asymmetrical. Cyclonic Rift and Ruinous Ultimatum deal with absolutely everything while leaving our board intact, and Doomweight Giant can be a real problem for creature strategies, either incrementally as we play a few enchantments per turn, or explosively when we reanimate several. I wanted to call attention to our mana base because a lot of thought went into what was included. You'll notice we don't play every Triomen duel, and the inclusions and omissions are meant to ensure we have the colors we need in the early game and can branch out later on. We do max out on 2-color fetch lands though, since we have some nice synergies for those in the list. Our color requirements are pretty demanding, but we fit in a basic forest and a basic island to give us some outs to Blood Moon style effects. We also include 2 game changers, Ancient Tomb and Chrome Mox, which can provide some early acceleration. We have room for a little utility, which lends some versatility to our crop rotation. Serra's Sanctum can obviously produce a ton of mana when we get our engine online, and is usually the go-to target for the tutor, but we can also grab Bojuka Bog to deal with the graveyard at instant speed, or Talon Gates of Madara to save one of our enchantresses from removal. Balagad Recovery is practically a tutor in a graveyard deck, and Boseiju and Odawara provide some extra interaction that's hard for opponents to counter. Now that we've seen all the pieces of the deck, we can really see how it all supports the overall game plan we talked about earlier. This list provides a lot of flexibility in how we approach games despite being extremely proactive. We definitely aren't invincible though. There are a few things that we'll struggle with or need to overcome to win, with Graveyard Hate being obvious. We're investing in that zone, so having all that hard work undone, usually at minimal expense to our opponents, can really throw us off. Decks more dedicated to combos can also be an issue. We don't have a win condition against infinite life gain, for example, and we don't play enough instant speed interaction to disrupt a dedicated combo player on our own without getting lucky. I mentioned Blood Moon earlier, and cards of that ilk are always a problem for 5-color decks that can't afford to lean into basic-based ramp options. I personally think it's healthy to have a check on greedy mana bases in the format, especially in bracket 4, but we do suffer for that premise with this list. Finally, mass exile effects like Format Boogeyman Farewell can punish us immensely if we aren't careful. These cards prey on any strategy dedicated to one type of permanent, and since Farewell also takes out the graveyard, we can end up completely blown out if we overextend across zones. We have ways to fight back though. When it comes to Graveyard Hate and Mass Exile, we can be thoughtful about how leveraged we are to the board in our graveyard. It's usually a good idea to keep some gas in the tank, meaning cards in hand, so that we can rebuild. For Graveyard Hate in particular, our commander can be a nice way to bait opponents into pulling the trigger, allowing us to refill and reanimate later on. Against combo decks, our solutions are mostly political. We can try to hang on to some counterspells, but our best option is to convince the rest of the table that the combo deck is the threat. We can do this by scaling back our game plan and spending resources to interfere with the combo player, simultaneously reducing our threat profile and making it possible for others to help shut them down. When we play against red or blue decks that seem like they might be looking to stacks, we should fetch aggressively for our forest and our island to give us the best possible chance of dealing with the offending permanent. Even just bouncing Blood Moon for a single turn can set us up to get some color fixing enchantments into play, or can enable a huge turn so we don't need to worry about mana at all. That's going to do it for the deck tech. Let's hop into a game and see the list in action. We win the die roll and get to go first. Our first opponent is Lauren of the Third Path. This mono-white commander shows up more often in the 99, and we're not thrilled to see enchantment removal in the command zone. Given Lauren's abilities, we shouldn't be surprised to see Blink or Group Hug themes, but we're really not sure what to expect from this deck. Selvala, Heart of the Wild is in the third seat. This mono-green commander has a CEDH pedigree thanks to its creature-based combo ramp potential. Any commander that gives access to both mana and card advantage is a force to be reckoned with, and green is another color that's great at dealing with our plan, so this is looking to be a tough pod. Last and definitely not least is the partner pair of Jeska Thrice Reborn and Tevishzat Doom of Fools, with Obosh the Prey Piercer as a companion. Being limited to odd costs is a steep deck building restriction, but Obosh supports both of Jeska's abilities. With 2 planeswalkers in the command zone, we should expect to see plenty of ways to deal with creatures. While they probably don't have many answers to enchantments, access to black means our graveyard could be threatened. Our first hand is intriguing, but keeping a 1-lander with a 9-drop and a 10-drop, even with access to a premium cantrip and tutor, is a non-starter. We'd need to draw an untapped blue source for this to be a good hand, and if we brainstorm lock ourselves, we'll likely have to vampiric tutor for a land, which seems rough. We can definitely do better, so we mulligan. Our second 7 is also intriguing. Cyclonic Rift and Eerie Ultimatum are extremely powerful, but we only have 2 lands. We can fetch a Jetmir's Garden, then play Bitter Reunion on turn 2 to dig for more mana sources though, and then Overlord of the Flood Pits can sculpt our hand further from there, with Force of Negation being insurance in case anyone gets out of hand early. It's risky, but we decide to keep. With so much top end, this deck doesn't mulligan well, so we should keep most functional hands we see. Everyone else keeps 7 cards, and we start things off by drawing Yuna, Hope of Spira, which could be excellent down the line if we find a payoff card to pitch to either of our discard effects. We play Flooded Strand and crack it for Jetmir's Garden as planned. Lauren has a tapped remote farm. I'm guessing they're a Commander Clash Enjoyer. Depletion lands can enable the catch-up ramp that White excels at while helping get ahead in the early game. Speaking of being ahead in the early game, Selvala has a forest into a Soul Ring. Yikes! The Planeswalking partners play and crack an Arid Mesa, fetching up a tapped Blood Crypt. We draw a very welcome Wooded Foothills and play our island, then cast Bitter Reunion. What to discard isn't completely obvious here, but we ultimately decide to pitch Eerie Ultimatum since it's the card we're least likely to be able to cast as the game goes on. We find Walk-In Closet, which will go great with our fetch lands, and Balaged Recovery, which can get the ultimatum back if needed. Sweet! Lauren plays a Plains and casts their commander, but doesn't destroy either Soul Ring or Bitter Reunion, which is a little surprising and signals some likely Group Hug aspirations. Unfortunately, the Selvala player, probably shocked that they still have a Soul Ring, ends up skipping through their turn. It's Soul Rings all around. Jeska Tevish plays the Badlands, then a Soul Ring of their own, before tapping out for a Coalition Relic, which they tap to get a charge counter. We draw Song of the Dryads, a nice versatile answer, and then play and crack Wooded Foothills for a tropical island so that we can cast Overlord of the Flood Pits for its impending cost. Our hand sculpting is going really well because we see Argothian Enchantress and Dryad of the Elysian Grove, which represent a real engine with Walk-In Closet in the mix. We discard the Song of the Dryads since we have better reactive cards in hand, and then pass, removing a time counter from the Overlord. Lauren plays Flagstones of Trocaire, then heads to combat, attacking Jeska Tevish for 2 Vigilant commander damage before passing. The Selvala player makes up for lost time, casting Wayward Swordtooth and then playing an Oran-Reef the Vastwood in a forest, which they use to cast Heritage Druid, which points to an Elf Ball strategy. Lauren responds with an activation, letting Selvala and themselves draw a card. The Rakdos player heads into their main phase, adding a black mana when they remove their charge counter from the relic. They spend 4 more to cast Tevishzat, then uptick him to create 2 Thrall tokens. They follow up with Phyrexian Tower, sacrificing a Thrall to it for 2 black mana, then tap out to cast Cultivator's Caravan. We draw Brainstorm, which is always welcome in a deck that could draw a 10-drop at any moment. We'd rather hold on to Balaged Recovery to regrow Eerie Ultimatum or Cyclonic Rift later, so we decide to get Walk-In Closet into play so we can make a land drop from our graveyard. We replay our Wooded Foothills, cracking it for Aziator's Proving Ground, and then pass. Lauren floats a mana with their Flagstones, then plays Lotus Field, sacrificing the Flagstones and remote farm to its trigger, and Flagstones gets them a tap Plains when it hits the bin. They then tap out and pass what ended up being a fairly awkward turn. We're a little surprised to see them leave Tevishzat alone, and get the sense this player might have a very neutral political style. Selvala plays a forest, then floats a mana with Soul Ring to cast their commander. Lauren responds with an activation, and we thank them for letting us draw a Sterling Grove. Selvala resolves and is going to trigger every time a creature enters, but I'll only mention it if there's a draw trigger. They follow up with Priest of Titania, then Azuri Renegade Leader. Elf Ball confirmed. Azuri is their 10th permanent, so the City's Blessing is online, and they have just enough mana left to activate Oran Reef, buffing the 3 creatures that entered this turn with +1/+1 counters. Selvala also passes through combat, and we might have found the most Planeswalker-friendly pod in the history of Magic. The Rakdos player plays a mountain, then upticks Tevish to turn a Thrall into 2 cards. They spend 3 mana on a Blasphemous Act, which we're happy to see overall given that we're unaffected, but that does mean there won't be any pressure on the Planeswalker for a bit. Their follow-up is Terror of the Peaks, a card that can definitely end games, especially if they get any damage multiplication online. We draw a finisher, Demolisher Spawn, and the way we're planning our turn, we'll be able to discard it to hand size. We cast our Gothian Enchantress, then replay our Wooded Foothills and crack it for a forest so we can cast Dryad of the Elysian Grove, drawing a Tundra with the Enchantress's cast trigger. We replay Flooded Strand and then pass, discarding the Demolisher to hand size as planned after we remove another time counter from our Overlord. Lauren plays a Windbrisk Heights, hiding something away, then casts Ghostly Prison to insulate themselves from attacks. Selvala recasts their commander, activates Oran Reef to pump her, then plays a forest before tapping out and passing. Jessica Thrice Reborn joins the Planeswalker party. They zero her, making the Terror of the Peaks deal triple combat damage this turn, then uptick Tevish Zat to sacrifice her and draw 3 cards. Since we have a full hand and a card in Mana Engine online, we can see where this is going. When they recast Jessica, we pitch our Brainstorm to Force of Negation to counter her. There's a chance they weren't going to attack us, and they definitely will after this, but we would have just been dead if they wanted to kill us, so we can't let Jessica hit the board. They add a charge counter to their Relic, then head to combat, knocking us down to 21, which is better than the -9 we probably would have hit otherwise. After that they pass, and we crack Flooded Strand for Zagoth Triome. We draw 1 with the Multiverse, which we can actually almost cast, but that card is not very good with Lauren lurking in the wings. We could play Yuna and reanimate something, but the targets we have right now aren't all that juicy. And again, Lauren. Instead, we opt to replay both our fetches and keep Cyclonic Rift up since the Rakdos player is likely going to try to finish the job. We attack Tevish with our Dryad, knocking him back down to 6 loyalty, then pass. We remove the final counter from our Overlord, which means we also have a flying blocker in case something goes wrong with our Cyclonic Rift plan. The Lauren player replays their commander, and this time they do blow something up. Our walk-in closet, which we can't really blame them for. They pass after that, and Selvala plays a Wood Elves, grabbing a forest, then plays a Wiredwood Lodge. They don't activate their Oran Reef before passing, which suggests they have plans for all that mana. Jessica Tevish adds a black from their charge counter, then they cast Rite of Flame before all but tapping out for Emrakul the Promised End. They target us with their trigger, which is less than ideal, but unless we draw something devastating, they shouldn't be able to do too much damage. The real question is whether we want a Cyclonic Rift before or after Emrakul resolves. And ultimately, our life total is too low to take the chance they'll send their Terror of the Peaks trigger elsewhere, so we crack our Flooded Strand for a Volcanic Island, forgetting about our Dryad's Prismatic Omen effect, and overload the Game Changer to return everyone else's board to their hands, including that pesky Lauren. Selvala pitches in, Nature's claiming the Rakdos player's Soul Ring before the Rift resolves. It's an interesting decision given how good Claim would be against us, but Jessica Tevish did wipe their board and is looking pretty threatening, so it does make some sense. Rift resolves, then Emrakul resolves, and they pass the turn to themselves, prompting us to crack our Wooded Foothills so they can't sacrifice it and fail to find. We draw Wild Growth, which can't really do any damage. They cast our Sterling Grove, and our Gothian Enchantress draws an Underground Sea. They sacrifice the Grove, getting a look at our deck list and searching up a Kenrith's transformation and putting it on top. They cast Wild Growth on one of their mountains to draw the transformation off Enchantress, then head to combat, attacking Selvala with the Overlord and Dryad, and chump attacking our Gothian Enchantress into their Emrakul. Overlord draws its Baelmerk cousin and Entity Tracker, and they opt to discard the Overlord. We're much happier to see that go than Yuna, which probably should have been the pick. Emrakul blocks down our 0/1, and then we connect for 7 unwilling damage on the Elf player. They Elkify our Overlord, drawing a Setessan champion, then play our Tundra so they can waste Balaged Recovery on returning Wooded Foothills to our hand. All in all, that could have gone much, much worse. We draw Entomb, which is pretty great with Yuna in hand. We play Underground Sea and Wooded Foothills, then Entomb for Lay Claim. We have a nice card draw backup plan in hand already, so ensuring the Rakdos player can't take us out seems like the best move. We cast 1 with the Multiverse, and we don't really mind if Lauren blows up our expensive enchantment now that we'll have Yuna online. We see Attunement on top of our library, which could end up setting up some very powerful plays later on. We free cast the Selesnya Legend, then head to combat, smacking Lauren for 3 and Selvala for 2, and gaining 2 life thanks to the lifelink Yuna provides our enchantment creature. After that, we head to end step, using Yuna to reanimate Lake which we attach to Emrakul, gaining control of the spaghetti monster. Lauren casts Austere Command, wiping out enchantments and creatures' mana value 3 or greater, which hits the entire board. Obviously, we've been set back here, but with our hand and our commander and plenty of lands, we're ready to rebuild, and we're no longer under threat from the Rakdos player. Poor Selvala recast their commander, then their Soul Ring, then their Wood Elves, grabbing another forest from their deck. They cast Llanowar Elves, then use Oran Reef to pump their board, passing with a single card left in hand. The Jessica Tavish player casts Grim Tutor, searching up a card. They recast Coalition Relic, tapping it to add a charge counter, then deploy a Soul Guide Lantern. We're guessing this is what they tutored for, and it's a pretty heads-up play from them. They saw our deck, so they know we have replenish effects, and being able to deal with our graveyard really limits our explosive potential. They exile Eerie Ultimatum with the Lantern's trigger, which is a great choice since we could draw Timeless Witness and end up reanimating our whole yard, leaving them the flexibility to activate the Lantern in the future. We crack Wooded Foothills for Ketria Triumph on the way into our turn, then draw Eidolon of Blossoms. It might be tempting to unleash all our card draw at once, but we're better off holding some of it back, so we cast Entity Tracker, then Setestian Champion, then cast Go-Shintai. Between it and the Shrine token, we draw 4 cards from our Enchantress effects, and they're great ones. We've got some lands, and we can hold on to Frantic Search for after the Lantern is used, and Ruinous Ultimatum means we can deal with everyone else's rebuild easily. We play our Marsh Flats, cracking it for a Bayou, then cast Utopia Sprawl, enchanting it to draw a few more cards. They're both lands, but Odawara is a nice piece of flexible interaction at this stage of the game. Lauren reveals what seems to be the true nature of their deck, probably, casting Ugin the Spirit Dragon. It seems like they're a control deck packing tons of sweepers. They -4 Eugene to clear out everything except our Shrine token and Jessica Tev's artifacts, and Selvala is probably out of the game at this point. Oracle of Moldiah might help them get back in it though. They find a forest and Gaia's Cradle on top, playing both and revealing a Farhaven Elf for later. They recast Selvala, then pump her with Oran Reef before passing. The Rakdos player cashes in their charge counter for a red mana and casts Jessica, who enters with 4 loyalty thanks to their commander cast this game. They -4 her, dealing 4 damage to Ugin, Selvala, and the Oracle. We're glad to see the Spirit Dragon go, but feel bad for the Elf player at this point. It's been a really rough pod for them. They add a charge counter to their relic before passing. We draw Doomwake Giant, which means we can oppress the elves now too, yeesh. We cast our Eidolon and draw Replenish. With the Lantern on board, we want to force them to crack it so we can refill our graveyard and do something overwhelming. To accomplish that, we recast our commander again, drawing a Starting Town and a Dredger's Insight, the latter of which will be great for building up our graveyard. The idea here is to threaten a Go-Shintai activation next turn, which will hopefully get them to expend their graveyard removal. We play our Bloodstained Mire, then head to combat, chipping in against the Rakdos player with our Shrine token. Lauren plays the Plains, then casts Farewell. We actually don't hate seeing this, since it forces the graveyard issue while leaving everyone else at square one. Jessica Tev activates the Lantern in response, sure, why not? And we crack Bloodstained Mire for Plateau and use Odawara to bounce our Eidolon, preserving our card draw engine. They recast Ghostly Prison before passing. Selvala plays Farhaven Elf, searching up a forest, then passes. The Rakdos player casts Ob Nixilis Reignited, upticking the Demon Planeswalker to trade a life for a card, then plays Takenuma and spends 3 mana to add Obosh to their hand. We draw Mana Confluence and start off rebuild number 3 with our Eidolon, drawing Overlord of the Hauntwoods. We cast Dredger's Insight, milling 4, and returning Timeless Witness to our hand, and we're happy to see Frostcliff Siege hit the bin since that can set up a big combat out of nowhere. We draw another painful 5-color land, City of Brass, off the Eidolon, and then cast Overlord of the Hauntwoods with Impending, creating an Everywhere token and drawing Mirari's Wake when it enters. That sets us up for a huge next turn, so we just play our Starting Town tapped and pass, planning to Frantic Search before the turn gets back to us to add some more goodies to the graveyard. We remove a time counter from the Overlord on end step and discard City of Brass to hand size. Lauren is finally done wiping the board and recast their commander to take out our Eidolon. They follow up with Explorer Scope, equipping it to Lauren, and then pass. Selvala casts Void Winnower, which hilariously has no effect on the Obosh deck. It's a bit of a problem for our Replenish plan, but fortunately Mirari's Wake and Ruinous Ultimatum both have odd costs. They swing their elf into Ob Nixilis before passing. The Rakdos player plays Luxury Suite, then upticks Ob again for another card. They cast Obsidian Charmaw, which is a card more red decks should run, taking out Gaia's Cradle. They follow up with Tevish Zot, making some thralls, and pass. We cast Frantic Search in their end step, finding Talon Gates of Madara and Force of Will. We don't have a blue card to go with it, but we do have plenty of mana, and a counterspell is great at this stage of the game. We discard Mana Confluence in our Giant, setting up Replenish a little bit more. Drawing Chromox isn't exciting, but we've got plenty to do this turn. We cast Mirari's Wake, then use our double mana to cast Ruinous Ultimatum, the 5th wipe of this game. We follow up with Replenish, and while this isn't a massive haul, it's still going to represent a ton of value. We choose Teamer for Frostcliff Siege, giving a buff and haste and trample to our team going forward, then draw 4 powerful enchantments from our Eidolon triggers. Dredger's Insight gains us a life from our creatures coming back, and then Doomwake Giant shrinks the empty board. We head to combat, bashing the Rakdos player, since with 6 cards in hand and a healthy amount of mana, they're our biggest threat. We've cast our Attunement, which can either find us another blue card for Force of Will, or be returned to hand to pitch, drawing Ripples of Undeath from the Eidolon. We head to end step, removing a time counter from the Overlord and discarding Chrome Mox. Lauren casts Bruna the Fading Light, using its trigger to reanimate Lauren, who we didn't notice they'd put in their graveyard. We can't do anything about that, but even if we could, it's probably not worth protecting Mirari's Wake at this stage. Sure enough, they blow up our powerful ramp enchantment before passing. Selvala takes a draw and then concedes, which is understandable considering how the game's gone for them. The Rakdos player spends most of their mana on Necrotic Hex, and we decide it's worth countering to give us some flexibility in how we approach our next turn. We activate Attunement, drawing 3 lands, and then discard 2 of them, Concordant Crossroads and Ripple of Undeath, to keep some powerful options in hand in case they have a Bajuka Bog or the like. We pitch Attunement to Force of Will the Hex, but they aren't done yet, evoking Fury by exiling Last One Standing. They distribute the damage to take out Eidolon and Lauren, then sacrifice the Elemental to Phyrexian Tower with the Evoke trigger on the stack, which is nice sequencing. After Fury hits the bin, they tap out to cast Black Market Connections. We draw Mana Drain, meaning we really don't have to worry about any free interference our opponents might employ. We cast Timeless Witness, returning Replenish to our hand, and then cast it, reanimating our Eidolon, Crossroads, Ripples of Undeath, and Mirari's Wake. Lauren has had enough and concedes while we stack our trigger, but Jessica Tev toughs it out. We draw several cards, most notably Omniscience, which means this game is over. We cast the end-all be-all of enchantments, drawing a Windswept Heath from our Eidolon, then free cast our Starfield, animating our enchantment army. Thanks to Frostcliff Siege, we can swing with everything, dealing 59 damage in combat, meaning that we win the game. Good game to our opponents as always. I was admittedly puzzled when it came to the Lauren player, both in terms of their approach to the game and their deck. It seemed like they were set up to be a control deck, and they definitely wiped the board several times, which had an impact on the game, but there didn't seem to be an actual plan there, coupled with their decision in the early game to avoid using Lauren to blow up Sol Ring or our Bitter Reunion, and I'm at a bit of a loss to categorize what they were up to. It's possible they had a strange draw and just happened to see all 5 of their board wipes, but the lack of overall card advantage contributed to that if so. I can understand the premise of Lauren helming a control deck, with the idea being that you don't care about the cards your opponents draw since you're just going to sweep them away, but Lauren alone isn't going to get the job done. We also didn't see a hint of how they plan to win the game, other than maybe Bruna, but that also isn't going to get the job done at bracket 4 tables. If I were building that kind of list, I'd angled for some combo finishes along the line of Rest in Peace Helm, but we just don't know what they were up to. I did like the land-based Ram package out of this deck. Mono White is deceptively good at developing mana, and we got to see how that can work out in this game. Unfortunately, the Selvala player never really had a chance. They did skip their second turn, which contributed, but thanks to Sol Ring they didn't fall too far behind. They would definitely have been positioned better if they'd cast Selvala on turn 2, then drawn off their Wayward Swordtooth, but even if they had, the cascade of board wipes was going to keep them from having too much of an impact. We only saw one big creature out of them, and it seemed like they were more of an elf ball deck than a dedicated Selvala combo deck, which I think is a nice way to bring CDH-worthy commanders into lower brackets. It did highlight the vulnerabilities of playing a lot of low-impact synergy pieces like Mana Dorks and Wood Elves though, because having that amount of air in the deck really gets punished when the board is wiped. I really liked the Partners and Companion list, and I'm actually working on one of my own with different commanders that will be featured in the next month or so. Jessica was the linchpin of this dynamic, having overlapping synergies with Tevesh and Obosh. Alongside Tevesh, the possibility of a Super Friends sub-theme was very plausible, and Tevesh being a sacrifice outlet for her, allowing her to be replayed over and over while drawing cards, gave them some grindy interactive potential. Obosh enables both of Jessica's abilities, sextupling combat damage or doubling her threefold burn. They definitely identified us as the threat, and they might have had more luck taking us down if they coordinated a bit with the rest of the table. Magic Online pods vary a lot in terms of communication, and this one was basically silent overall. Things would have looked very different if they had worked alongside the Lauren player, getting them to sequence their board wipes differently. I want to commend this player for their technical play. It seemed like they really know the game and knew their deck very well, with small flourishes like sacrificing Fury with the Evoke trigger on the stack going a long way to squeeze every last drop of value out of a list. Tutoring for Graveyard Hate was also not a play I think many players would have made there, and it was timed perfectly to provide maximum disruption in the wake of the board wipes. Overall, the story of this game was about us and the partner pair duking it out, with Lauren wiping the board periodically. We were able to gain the advantage in that dynamic thanks to our enchantment-based mana and card advantage engine. Part of that involved throttling our engine to ensure we always had some pieces to get us started again when the dust settled. We were thoughtful about what we put into play or our graveyard and what we kept in our hand, and that thoughtfulness paid off as our opponent's resources dwindled. I'm glad this game showcased a situation with known graveyard hate, because playing around Soul Guide Lantern left us in a great position to charge out of the gates after Farewell leveled the playing field. Understanding the threat of Jessica activating twice in one turn was important as well, and that kind of thing could easily catch other players off guard. In addition to the games I played with the Bracket 3 version of the deck, I played 4 others with slight variations of this list, tweaking between matches. I won 3 of those games, with the losses coming from a Magna deck that landed a Blood Moon against us, another 5-color deck, and a 4-color deck, and a more interactive game where a Cormella Glamour Thief Spellslinger Reanimator combo deck managed to win 1 turn ahead of us after some interesting choices from another of our opponents. The overall architecture of the deck worked well, with a good balance of the different effects we want to see to enable a powerful mid-range through line with room for explosive surprises for opponents. The mana multipliers in particular overperformed, allowing the deck to fire on all cylinders and harness resources from hand and graveyard alike to build a winning position. The first update is something I just forgot to do. The deck really wants Mistrise Village and can definitely afford to play it since it's likely an untapped land in the list. Including it would allow us to safely replenish or cast a massive spell for full retail without worrying about efficient answers. It would give crop rotation some additional utility, and I'd recommend swapping your choice of the 2 game changers, Ancient Tomb or Chrome Mox, to make room. The section of the deck with the most room for change and self-expression is the payoff category. As long as the effects are big and powerful, just about anything can go in here. I purposefully avoided 2 cards, Overwhelming Splendor and Captive Audience, because the prospect of shutting out just 1 player as early as turn 4 isn't very fun to me. If you want to be meaner, you can make room for those cards, or you could include some pet cards or interesting combos. The last change I'd look at making would be to fit in 1 or 2 more flexible instant speed removal spells like Assassin's Trophy or Generous Gift. The combo vulnerability we discussed in weaknesses is real, and these kinds of cards are flexible enough that they have game against just about everything. I'd look at tweaking the interaction list overall to make room, with slower cards like Awaken the Honored Dead and Song of the Dryads being likely choices to swap. There are a few reasons I'd encourage you to build this deck or one like it. The first is if you like being the archenemy or want to give it a try. With a threatening commander and an obvious powerhouse game plan, this deck is going to get attention at the table. If you like drawing cards and grinding, this is a great option for that. The combination of Enchantress Engine and Graveyard as a resource has tons of room for maneuvering and will let you touch a lot of cardboard. This is also a great list for people who prefer their commander play a supporting role. Go-Shintai's fingerprints are all over it, but I can easily imagine games where you never cast it and still have an excellent time. Finally, if you're a resource management nerd, decks like this offer opportunities to flex those muscles. You'll often have tons of choices from the mid-game on, and most of that hinges on deciding where to invest and when in order to move the game forward while protecting against vulnerabilities. That's going to do it for today's video. I hope you had as much fun watching it as I did making it, and if you've made it this far and haven't already, definitely consider liking, sharing, subscribing, and most importantly of all, commenting. I'm particularly interested to hear from returning viewers about the new deck tech format because I'm planning to use it going forward and to make some Commander Theory videos that employ it. I'd also love to hear other thoughts on the video, the game, the deck, or the format in general. Good luck and have fun in your future endeavors. Magic Boy out.